Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. But that's not why I'm here today. This is another Saving Savvy episode. And this time I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of switching to T-Mobile. So, a little background: I've had cell phones now for over 30 years and have used all the major carriers and some of the minor ones too. And prior to switching to T-Mobile, we actually had two phone plans in our house. I was on a limited Verizon plan with limited text, minutes, and data. And the other four members that are currently in my house were on a track phone family plan. And that's because they barely used the phone. They just needed like text, like pick me up, that kind of stuff. And we really didn't need a lot of bandwidth. So that had very limited talk, very limited text, but it was very, very cheap. And the combined plans were roughly about $150 or $160. Well, lo and behold, my Verizon plan was starting to run close to the end of its contract, and it just so happened that one of the family members needed to add minutes to their track phone. And I will tell you, in my personal opinion, track phone customer service is some of the worst customer service that I've ever experienced, and that's saying a lot. And in the process, and many, many days and many, many hours of activity, in a process of just trying to add minutes to a phone, they managed to disconnect two of the four phones. And then they told me that my wife's phone was no longer working and I had to buy a new phone. So I went to Walmart and bought her an Android phone, only to find that the Android phone was not compatible. So it was time to switch, and we switched to T-Mobile. So what's the big selling point about T-Mobile, or selling points? Well, one, there's no contract. And if you've ever had to break a contract with multiple phones, it's extraordinarily expensive. The second thing is it includes unlimited text, unlimited MMS, and unlimited talk, which is great now that my kids have discovered texting and really text thousands of times a month nowadays. It also has pretty generous data plans, and you can adjust the data among the phones. Like, for instance, the parents can maybe get more data and the kids can get less data. And the other thing I like about it is that you can buy fairly inexpensive phones. For instance, you can buy Android phones for $100, $150 and have your kids use those phones. And if something terrible happens to them, it's not like you're dealing with a $600 iPhone. And by the way, iPhones are compatible with T-Mobile, so you can use whatever kind of phone you want. So all this great stuff, the price is great for five phones. It's about $150. Can't complain. But what's the drawback? And the big drawback with T-Mobile is the coverage. So my Verizon phone pretty much worked almost everywhere. That can't be said of the T-Mobile phones. So they work great in my private practice office, really phenomenally well. They work pretty good at my home. But when I go to a work site in another major city in Illinois, although I can get reception on the road, I can't get it in either of my two work sites. And people with Verizon phones, for instance, get reception just fine in those buildings. In fact, at that other city, can't even get reception in a McDonald's parking lot. So we have some limitations there. When I visit my daughter, who lives in a university town, well, it works fine. But if I go in any of the back roads and go to some of the smaller towns around, there's absolutely no reception. In fact, although typically my kids have no problem using it, recently one of my daughters was at a friend's and the phone wouldn't work because she was getting no signal. I could give you other examples too, but it kind of gives you an idea that the overall coverage for the track phones are vastly inferior to a carrier like Verizon. So, am I going to switch back to Verizon and pay an arm and a leg? No, I'm keeping T-Mobile, because in the vast majority of cases that I use the phone and that my kids use the phone, probably in 99% of the cases, there is either a workaround or the phones work fine. So for instance, when I'm at those other work sites, I can use the Wi-Fi at those sites and use Wi-Fi calling. My daughter, when she was having difficulty in the house, really all she had to do is step out on the porch and she could have made a call. And what about these rural kind of places? Well, I don't really travel down those roads very much at all. And to be honest with you, because I'm so compulsive, remember that Android phone I told you about? That track phone? Well, that actually runs on the Verizon network. And you can buy a year's worth of minutes from track phone for about less than $100. And so I have that phone as my emergency backup phone when my T-Mobile phone doesn't work, just because I'm compulsive, but I probably don't even need that. So there definitely are solutions if you want to use T-Mobile, but I would not recommend it if you were like say a salesman that traveled to a lot of small towns, or maybe if you lived in a more rural area. It's strictly for people that live in more metropolitan areas or close to the interstate. So with that, I'd like to say thanks for listening. And if you get some time, please give my free podcast a listen. It's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. You can find it on iTunes. If you like this video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And please subscribe to my channel. There's lots of stuff on it, and you might find some of it interesting. Take care.